Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Karis May, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is leading seaman Bianca Listozzi. We warmly welcome the family of Corporal James Stewart, whose story will be read shortly. We also welcome members of the Kokoda Track Authority who are joining us for the ceremony this evening. We welcome veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from around Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Charleston Public School and Charleston East Public School and Walcher Central School. From Queensland, Ashgrove State School, and from South Australia, Concordia College from Highgate. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. To commence this evening's ceremony, I would like to invite you all to stand and join in singing the national anthem. Boys and girls, you may now be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and other operations for over more than a century. But first we present and lament Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal James Stewart. Popularly known as Jimmy, James Stewart was born in 1894 in Aberdeen, Scotland, to James and Bella Stewart. When James was 13 years old, the Stewart family immigrated to Australia and settled in Auburn, New South Wales. He attended the Superior Public School, Auburn, and after leaving, gained an apprenticeship as a cabinet maker with Buchanan Brothers Forest Lodge. He was working as a cabinet maker when the First World War began. On the 28th of August 1915, shortly after his 21st birthday, Stewart enlisted service in the AIF with his younger brother George. After his initial training, Stewart was allotted to the 11th Reinforcements to the 13th Battalion and George to the 2nd Field Artillery Brigade. He embarked from Sydney on the 13th of October with other reinforcements aboard the transport ship Port Lincoln, bound for Egypt. Stewart spent several months at a training depot until he was taken on strength of the 13th Battalion at the beginning of March 1916. He quickly became a popular member of the battalion and made a number of close friends. Army life and the food seemed to agree with Stewart, and he gained weight. His mates soon gave him the nickname Poddy. The battalion sailed for France in June and had a brief period of acclimatisation to the Western Front in nearby Armentières, in what was known as the Nursery Sector. Stewart took part in the battles of Pozières and Mouquet Farm in August, before the heavily depleted 13th Battalion was sent to the quieter Ypres sector in Belgium to rest and reinforce. The 13th Battalion returned to the Somme in October and spent the terrible winter of 1916 and 1917 rotating in and out of the front line. Stewart was hospitalised on New Year's Day 1917, suffering a mild case of trench foot, but was soon back with the battalion. In early February, he spent 5 days in hospital, suffering pleurisy, and missed the battalion's successful but costly attack on Stormy Trench. In April, the battalion took part in the disastrous Battle of Bullecourt and suffered heavy casualties. In the days after the battle, Stewart was again briefly hospitalised with trench fever. The battalion next took part in the Battle of Polygon Wood in late September. Though casualties again were heavy, the Australians took and held their objectives. November saw the 13th Battalion return to France, and at the end of the month, Stewart was promoted to Lance Corporal. The Germans launched their spring offensive in the late March 1918, and the 13th Battalion saw heavy fighting around Villers-Bretonneux, particularly on the 25th of April, when it was involved in recapturing the village. A relatively quiet period followed, during which Stewart was promoted to corporal and placed in charge of the Lewis gun team, despite his short stature. When the Great Allied Offensive began on 8th August, the 13th Battalion was involved in the advance towards Morcourt and took all of its objectives during the day. The next day was spent consolidating their positions. In the evening, elements of Delta Company, including Stewart and his Lewis gun section, were sent forward to capture a trench and clear out the German machine gun nests there. Stewart's number 2 on the gun, Corporal Tom Burton, later described what happened next. When we were within a few yards of this trench, an enemy machine gun opened upon us. Corporal Stewart and his gun team succeeded in reaching the trench, but we were immediately detailed to open up on the gun, giving us the trouble while a bombing party worked up the trench. To do this, it was necessary for us to get out on top, and it was here that Corporal Stewart was hit in the head with a bullet from a machine gun. Stewart was killed instantly, along with 2 members of his gun team, and another man was wounded. Burton continued. Corporal Stewart was buried in the field and a temporary cross erected over his grave. He was one of the gamest little fellows that ever went into action, and his loss has been keenly felt by a large circle of friends in the battalion. 1 week later, his brother George was wounded in action, suffering a gunshot wound to the thigh. His injury prevented him from rejoining his unit, and he eventually returned to Australia in December 1918. James Stewart was 24 years old when he died. Sadly, the location of his grave was lost, and today he's commemorated on the Villers-Bretonneux Memorial. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal James Stewart, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Boys and girls, could you please stand for the ode and last post?
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We would like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.